Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to make a simple, elegant Christmas card. So for images today, we're going to be using the Art Impressions Christmas Wreath set, and this does come with the coordinating dies. We're going to be using all three of those stamps today. And for ink, I'm using the Versamark Watermark Ink Pad, and for paper, I'm using the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. So I've gone ahead and placed that in my mini Misty, and we're going to stamp these two images. Later on, we will stamp that third image, that little cluster of holly leaves, a little bit later on, but at this point, I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing exactly. So I've got my Pink and Main anti-static powder tool, just laying down a little bit of powder first, and then I'll ink up my stamp and press that out with the STAMPendable stamp press. We're going to be doing some embossing, so by placing that anti-static powder down, it will reduce any powder sticking anywhere we don't want it to be. So I've got my Ranger embossing powder. This is the liquid platinum, and this is one of my all-time favorite embossing powders. I have been using this for years. I love it. You can see the container. I have tons of it because I use it all the time. And when you heat this with your heat tool, it really does kind of look liquidy almost. You can kind of see that there. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So once that's embossed, I'm grabbing the coordinating die, and I'm going to, there's one for the outer edge of the wreath, so you could just cut it out and leave that middle part intact if you wanted to stamp a sentiment there. Or you can die cut the outer edges and the inside, and we're going to be doing that today. So I've got some Post-it temporary tape. I'm taping that down so that I can run it through the die cutting machine. So here's that second die that will die cut the inside portion of our wreath. So I like that you have the option of just cutting the outer edges or both. So I think that's a nice feature. So I went ahead and die cut that little bow as well. For the bow, I'm going to die cut two more out of that leftover Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. We're going to stack these up just to give it that bow a little bit more dimension. So we'll have three of those all together. I'm using the Sizzix Sidekick to run those through. And now to do my coloring, which is really, really simple. If you're not big on coloring, you will love this because I'm just taking the Haze Blue Zig Clean Color Real Brush pen. You could use any markers you have here, and then I'm blending that out just to create a little tiny bit of a shadow there in that kind of icy blue color, which I just thought would go really well with our card. So again, I want to keep this very simple, very elegant. So once I blend out that color, I'm going to do the leaves the same way. And again, just a little bit of color right down at the base of each of these leaves, and then I'll use my blender pen and pull that color out towards the edges, leaving these leaves mostly white. And you could certainly skip this part if you want to, or you could use a light gray here. That would actually be pretty. Again, just creating a little shadow. So let me give you a closer look at that. I finished all the rest of those leaves and our little bow. Let's go ahead and layer up that bow. So we've got those extra two pieces that we die cut from some 100-pound cardstock. Just going to stack these up, and I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to glue these together. This is a super strong adhesive and it dries clear. I'll just lay an acrylic block on top of that while it dries. Now I've got some more Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. This measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and I'm scoring it at 5 1/2 inches. So we'll have an A2 size top folding card. And for some pattern paper, which this little paper pack is just loaded with these gorgeous papers, Those are the three we're going to be using today. And this is from the Photoplay. It's a Wonderful Christmas paper pad. And this is a 6x6 paper pad, and it's double-sided. And look at these patterns. These are just fantastic. Some of these could be used all year round, especially like the wood grain we're using today. And then we're going to use that beautiful blue as the blue sky. And it's got some little white flecks in it, which almost looks like snow. So let me set that aside. And again, we're going to use these three. I'm first going to grab this light blue one with the little white dots on it. And then from my A2 rectangle double stitch dies from Art Impressions, I'm grabbing that largest one. And now I'll grab that second largest one to die cut this wood grain background. And I do want the wood grain to go horizontally, so I'm going to line that up and again run that through the die cutting machine. So those will just get layered up and our wreath will sit right on the front there, but I want to create a little window first. So I'm using my journal template dies from Art Impressions. This is part of that watercolor series that they have. And we're going to, let me first just show you all the dies that you get in this set. And there are some add-ons that have been added to this set. I think there's 3 different add-ons at this point. So you can use this to create that journal, or you can just use the individual pieces like I'm going to do here. So I've got that little 4-panel window looking piece, which I know isn't a window, but that's how we're going to be using it today. And then I've got that little banner die. So I'm lining this up on my pattern paper up towards the top here because I want to leave a little bit of room for my sentiment down at the bottom. And again, I'll run that through. And it's easiest if you place these on a little bit of an angle before you run them through. They just go through a lot easier. And I'm running a second piece through out of some white 100-pound cardstock. So we'll have 2 of those little window pieces. Now the one that I die cut from the wood grain pattern paper is not going to show. That's just going to help give us a little dimension. So I've got that beautiful blue paper. Again, this has that beautiful white fleck in it. So it gives that look of snow. We're going to put that paper right behind our window opening. And we'll cut that at 3.5 by 4 3/4. Again, this will sit right behind that window opening. And so I'm just going to glue that in place. And look at that pretty pattern that we have to cover up. I always hate with my pattern papers when it's double-sided that I have to use up some of the other paper that's in this collection. And then look at that pattern paper as well. That would be really pretty together, those red snowflakes with those little houses. So let's put some glue on the wood grain window. And I'm not worried about this lining up with the lines in the wood grain that are already there because, again, this isn't going to show. It's just to give us a little bit more dimension. And now let's put that white one on top. You could certainly do any color here you want. You could go with a darker gray or a blue. Navy blue would be really pretty. But I decided to use the white. Again, I'm trying to keep the palette very muted, very light and elegant. So now I can go ahead and glue down my little bow. So we can go ahead and glue this down. And we're just going to center that on the front of the card. And then I'm going to pop up that wreath just to give it a little bit more dimension. And the nice thing about using the liquid glue is you have a little time to move things around just to make sure they're nice and straight. So now we can glue this panel down and look at that beautiful plaid. Oh, that's just gorgeous. So let's lay this one. This will fit exactly to the size of our card. So I'm just going to lay it against the edge of the table and line everything up. Now I've got some 3D foam tape. And I'm going to cut this into a narrow strip here. So I'm just cutting it in half. And then you want to remove the backing from the front and the back. And then I'm just going to wrap it right around this wreath. This would be great. This is a great technique. If you wanted to make a little shaker element here, you certainly could. In the center there, you could make a little shaker card by adding some acetate and some little sequins. But I'm just going to pop it up. And I'll center it up here at the top of this little window. Now for my sentiment, I'm using the Art Impressions Christmas Sentiment Set. This is new and it's got all these great little sentiments. And I've got that banner die from that journal template set that we looked at earlier. And you can see that it fits a lot of these sentiments, but it's a little bit short for some of these others. Now the sentiment I chose was the Christmas Magic sentiment, so it's a little bit too short for that. And I'm going to show you how to adjust for that. So I've got my Pink and Main anti-static powder tool. I've just laid some of that down again like we did before. I'm stamping using that Versamark Watermark Ink Pad. And then we'll go ahead and emboss this as well. I stamped this a couple of times. Back to that same embossing powder. And then we'll go ahead and heat set that. I'm just tapping off any excess. I'm letting the heat tool heat up a little bit before I go to the cardstock, just so I can avoid any curling. And then once it's heat set, you'll know that it's completely heat set when it goes. It's very metallic-y looking. If there's any dark spots, you probably want to go back over those. So now you can see that my banner is a little bit too small for my sentiment. So we're going to line it up towards the left-hand side of the sentiment. And then we'll go ahead and tape this down. And we're only going to cut a portion of this banner. So wherever the plate is where we're cutting. So I'm laying that plate down only about 3/4 of the way across, leaving that right-hand side open. So now I'll show you that it cut that 3/4 of the left side. Now we need to cut the right side. So I'm going to, let me take that tape off so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to line it up on the right side of that sentiment and make sure it lines up with the die that we already cut, with the die cutting we've already done. So you're going to just kind of fiddle around with it until it locks right into place there. And then we're going to cut this last little portion on the right hand side here. So I'm going to run that through the Sizzix Sidekick machine. So remember, where that second plate is where the cutting will occur. So now you can see we've cut that entire banner exactly to the size we want. And you can do this for any size sentiment you want. Now you've got these little score lines on this banner. So we're going to fold back and then fold towards ourselves. That will create a little Z fold. I'm grabbing my Distress Oxide Speckled Egg ink to create a little shadow around the edges. And that's very similar to that Haze blue color that we used on the wreath and on the bow. I'm using a little sponge dauber to apply that ink. So I went all the way around that banner. But once I was done here, I took a look at it and I realized that when it was folded back on itself, it needed a little bit more shadowing on the back side. So when it folds in, you have a little shadow tucked in there behind the banner. So you'll see here when I fold it again, get a little shadow back there. So now let's go ahead and take that same foam tape and add a little strip of it right between those score lines, and then a little dab of glue on each of those little flaps. Then I'll just position this right in place. I'm centering it under that window. Now I've got some really pretty little gems, pearls and clear gems. And these are the Sparkletz embellishments from Buttons, Galore, and more. And I will list and link all the products I'm using today down below and also on my blog. This little set of embellishments has a really nice selection of a variety of blue tones and textures to these little beads. So I'm going to mix and match all of those, and those will be the little berries on the wreath. I'm just using that Marvy jewel picker to pick those up and position those in place. So I finished all of those little pearls all the way around. You can see how pretty that's going to look. And then I put one of the pearls right in the center of that bow. Now I've got my Wink of Stella clear glitter pen, and I'm adding a little bit of glitter to that bow. Now let's go back to that set. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to grab that little cluster of leaves and berries, and I'm just mounting it on my little acrylic block. That's from the watercolor travel box from Art Impressions. You get 3 acrylic blocks and you get that little watercolor palette. And it comes in that little box, which is really nice because you can store all your paint brushes and things in there as well. So let's go ahead and emboss this. Same as we did before. I stamped it with the Versamark Watermark Ink Pad. I prepped it with that anti-static powder. And then we're adding that liquid platinum embossing powder. And I'm coloring this in the same way. I'll use my scissors. There is no die for this little stamp, so I'm quickly cutting that out using my detail scissors. I've added a few little pearls to the top of that, and then I'm using some 3D foam tape and a little touch of glue where it overlaps that banner, just to make sure everything lies nice and flat here. And then I'm just pulling up the tips of those leaves a little bit, just to give them a little bit more dimension. For the inside of the card, I'm going back to the Christmas Sentiment set, and I'm going to grab one of these here. And I've placed it, since my card is done, I've placed it in my 12 by 12 Misty stamp positioner. But you could certainly use an acrylic block here to do your stamping. I just happen to have this, so I can open up the card completely, place it right inside this larger Misty, and then press that out and do my embossing. So let's take a closer look at the finished card. And that sentiment on the inside says, "Warmest wishes for a Merry Christmas." So you can see how simple this was to do. Just a little bit of layering, and I just love that blue paper and those blue pearls. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.